Michael, who is in Pensacola. Hi, can you hear
Hey
us?
guys, what's going on?
We're good. You're on the air. What's up?
Not much. I was just calling in to ask you guys. I was atheist I was a Christian up until about my adolescent years. I'm in my early 20s now.
Mm-hmm.
And within the past year or so, I've started to do a lot more research into Christianity, and I eventually became atheist. Okay. I've been trying to figure out some way to communicate with my family a little bit more and explain to them all the, I guess,
You're figuring out how to
into their own religion that they follow. They're all Southern Baptist, and
right.
I just whenever I try to have these conversations with them, I come off as pretentious or, typical response. You come off as pretentious or, hey, why do you think you know more than us?
Okay, so they know you're out. This isn't a coming out question. They're aware you're an atheist, correct?
Yeah, they're
okay.
totally aware.
And these conversations, when they occur, who's initiating them?
Oh, myself.
Can I ask why?
Because this has been very rewarding to me, and I feel like the amount of knowing what is like, they live under this kind of, Seth Andrews calls it your God glasses, and if I were just able to get them to maybe do a little bit more critical thinking in their own religion, I think it'd be rewarding for them, and I think we would understand each other better, so to speak.
Do they want to do this?
Half of them do, half of them don't.
Do you restrict the conversations to the people that do?
I get a little bit more deeper into the people who do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you're respecting when somebody says they don't want to have this conversation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's a tough hurdle to cross, right? Especially if they're still if their religion is very important to them, they're very deep into it. They're going to react offensively to any perceived challenge, and if it comes from a family member, there could be that additional aspect of resentment involved. It's different for everyone, though. The whole question of how do you come out to your family, or how do you talk about this sort of thing when you have a religious family in such a way that doesn't alienate them. Presumably that's the main concern. You want to be able to talk about them and still have a relationship with them and not alienate them with these questions, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. See, that's why I would suggest, I don't know, Tracie, you may have a different idea, but I would suggest just make yourself available for questions. Like just say, any questions that you guys have. If you could tell them, look, I've done some studies, I've thought a lot about these beliefs, I've thought a lot about the religion and God and Jesus and all of these things. I've come to the conclusion that I don't believe it, but it hasn't really changed me as a person. If you want to have a conversation with me about this, if you want to ask me questions about why I've rejected these beliefs and why I think the way I do now, I'm happy to answer any question you might have. And if you do it that way, then that kind of puts the ball in their court, and that doesn't necessarily feel like you're maybe aggressively
I'm just
confronting
curious,
them.
like when you initiate these conversations, like how would you initiate them? Like if I was your believing relative, and when we're in a room together and whatever, we're at dinner or whatever, and how does this come up?
Well, honestly, they used to be the ones who started it. I think I remember the first time they ever had this conversation. It had been after I'd spoken to my brother about it a few times, and it leaked to my parents. And one of them sat down with me one day, and we were watching TV or something. They're like, "You really don't believe in God?"
Okay, so they initiated it.
Okay, so that's pretty clearly them doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was towards the beginning, though. From there on out, we kind of softened it down. But I'm just giving an example of the initial conversations. But essentially, from there on out, I was like, I researched the Bible, I researched arguments for and against Christianity, and I come to the conclusion that there's really no ethical reason so far for me to believe in God.
Okay, and so what do they say? And why do they think that is pretentious to just sort of assert, for you just to... What do they say? Do they give you anything specific that they're saying?
A lot of them they're like, how do you know all the answers? Like, I don't. That's kind of the point.
Right.
Well, how do they know it? I guess what I'm trying, do they point to anything that they would say is pretentious that they are not also engaged in, I guess I should ask?
I don't. I don't explicitly say you're wrong. You should, reevaluate your life and everything like that. But you say, hey, you really should, read into this. Like, are you trying to tell me I've been wrong for all these years? Or are you trying to,
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying, and I think that any comeback that you're getting to the effect that, oh, well, you're just being pretentious and you think you know it all and you think you're so smart, and we've heard that sort of thing too. That's very commonly just a defense mechanism on the part of the believer. They're not quite equipped to be challenged in the way that you're challenging them, even if it's you're doing it in a rather benign way and not a particularly aggressive way. It's simply the fact that so many Christians are so used to, I won't say living in a bubble, but the point is that Christian culture is very insular. If you notice, there are Christian movies, and there's Christian rock, and there's Christian bookstores, and then churches are extremely good at creating that sense of a community within the community, a home sort of a thing. And all of this serves to kind of shield them from any sort of even day-to-day confrontation with ideas that challenge their beliefs.
Absolutely.
And so even the most, innocuous, criticism or challenge could be taken by them as a reason. They'll just throw up defenses reflexively. So it's not even really anything to do with you, I think. It's just they don't really know what to say, so they just kind of say that. It's funny because there is that aspect of it, and then there's also the whole aspect of the fear aspects of the indoctrination. One reason that, my parents know that I'm not a believer. Even at my age, it still can be an issue between us. And the main reason why we have, and I'm very close to my parents, I'm very lucky in that regard, but one issue that is very troubling is that my mother is a firm believer in afterlife and heaven and hell, right? And it freaks her out, the mere idea that I might be going to hell, right? And so because of this, we have this sort of agree not to discuss the thing issue. That's the policy between us. But of course, it makes me angrier simply because she has had this unnecessary fear programmed into her brain. It's this thing that causes tangible emotional strife in her life that just doesn't need to be there because it's about nothing, right? But religion put it there, and it put it there as one of the many things it does as part of the whole indoctrination process to control any sort of dissent, to impose that compliance through fear. So that's my reason. So you have to kind of just sound your family out and see where the weak spots are, where the real trouble spots might be. Understand that it's not really anything that they can control in a lot of ways, how they might respond to you, simply because that's how they've been trained to react and trained to think about this stuff. And then just sort of fish around, and if you really, really want to have a dialogue with them about your atheism, though, and that's important to you, which I can understand, right? It's sort of I tell people that being, the atheist child of Christian parents is very similar to being the gay child, right? There's something like this is,
exactly.
It's your identity, and you just want them to accept your identity, even if it's not something that they might agree with. It's like, look, it's still your kid,
Yeah.
And so it's a similar difficulty. So, whatever problems that gay kids might have would probably be similar problems that atheist kids would have in terms of. And I'd
like to just throw in that there is actually a communication technique that I can hand you, but I agree with Martin that this is not. I'm not sure that this is really a miscommunication as much as a defensiveness, and because I'm not firm on the idea that this is a legitimate miscommunication or a legitimate complaint on their end about the pretentiousness, I do agree with Martin that it's probably more of a defense mechanism, so this may not work because it works generally with people that really are trying to communicate, and if they're not really trying to communicate, it might not help you. But one thing you can do is whenever they raise an objection to your tone, right, when they say something like, well, that's very pretentious of you, or that seems very, whatever they're saying that is about how you sound, one thing you can say is, I'm not trying to sound pretentious. Can you tell me how I might have restated that question that would have, been less offensive to you or less of a problem? And let them kind of give you, they can give you then feedback on how you sound to them And that would at least help you kind of understand what they're hearing, because it sounds like they're hearing something that you're not attempting to communicate. I think the interference is right on what Martin is saying. The interference is the defensiveness that is built in with indoctrination. Because that's the interference, I don't know if this would work, but at least it would let you know how you sound to them, which is probably going to be strange. But at least give them the opportunity to say, here's how you sound to me, this is what I'm hearing, and then you can compare that to what you were trying to say. And at the very least, you could say, okay, well, I wasn't trying to say that, or I wasn't trying to sound like that. What I was really doing was just asking about this, or I was really just trying to explain this or that. And it might help to de-escalate it, at least, to give them the opportunity to explain what it is that bothers them about the tone.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was going to ask, if I do, hopefully this all goes well, if I do, quote-unquote, break through with one of them, and they do get a little bit more interested and they actually want to read into this stuff. I love the Iron Chariots Wiki. It's done a lot of great things for me, but do you guys have any particular books or resources or anything that you would point, somebody who was looking to do more research to?
What kind of research are you interested in? Because it's a broad lot of things.
Something that kind of, I guess, it points out all the, I don't want to use the word flaws, but I guess,
well, yeah, it's funny because many of the books on atheism are written for, a few of them are written for an audience of Christians looking to doubt, or at least, or who have curiosity. Dawkins rather, I think, grandly hoped in the God delusion that Christians would read his book, and by the end of it that they would not be Christians anymore. He said, that's my goal. He said, I don't know exactly how realistic that is that will actually happen, but he did say that he hoped an audience of believers would read his book, and that the book was an exercise in persuasion. Yeah. The book that I actually remember reading at a very formative time was one by a guy named George Smith called Atheism, the Case Against God.
Yeah, and also Why Atheism. I was actually thinking of George Smith myself.
Why Atheism might actually even be a better one.
Yeah.
And there's also, how could I just forget this? Because it's brand spanking new. One of our co-bloggers at our network at FTB has written, Greta Christina has written a new book that is just out called Coming Out Atheist, and why it's important, and perhaps advice on how to do that. So that could be another one to look at for yourself, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So, but anyway, all we can do is wish you good luck with it. It's going to be a process. It's going to take time, and there's going to be a lot of communication hurdles, and just
focus your resources too. Focus your resources, because your time is limited. I mean, you don't want to be spending too much time with people that are going to run you in circles and they don't hear what you're saying. So if you get from any of these people a little bit more of what you feel is an honest conversation, somebody that's really willing to sit down and talk about the ideas with you, and you don't feel like there's as much of a wall, I would say that a person that will talk to you in that way is probably more worth your time.
If you guys don't mind me asking, so I don't want to take up any more of your time. But
okay. Yeah.
One of the main questions I get, and I answer, but sometimes not to their satisfaction, is why are you doing this? Why can't we just have our own beliefs? It doesn't affect you what our beliefs are, and sometimes I just say, well, it affects how you live your lives. Your beliefs inform your decisions, and.
But at the same time, you should make it clear. Look, I'm not trying to tell you what to believe. I'm just telling you what I believe and why. I mean, ultimately, what you believe is your choice. So again, if they feel, that's another defensive thing. It's like, why are you trying to destroy my? Well, I'm not trying to destroy your faith, but I am trying to make you understand that there are other ways to be, and voila, they don't make you a bad person. Which is something that a lot of, another problem, another preconception atheists have to overcome. But look, man, good luck to you. We got to go on to the next batch of callers because we got a full house. But thank you very much, and good luck. It's just going to take some time.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Take care.